is exciting, getting ready for the big 4th of July parade here in beautiful Fredericksburg, Texas. This has become burning with the rebound.
Welcome to the Fredericksburg Chamber of Commerce.
Please all time here, 3,500. So they go to your dad. That's
we hear that promise again in John's Gospel.
We love living in the country.
When I think about
Husband.
Along the fairways at Lady Bird have a way of slowing down.
Billy fans, this is
on September 25th, 1925.
John Crawford Fritch.
Nature and beauty along the fairways at Lady Bird have a way of slowing life down. While the front nine features significant elevation changes and the tranquility of Live Oak Creek, the back nine stuns with its panoramic vistas of the surrounding hills. As the home of the Fredericksburg Junior Golf Foundation and the Fredericksburg Middle School and High School golf teams, all of us at Lady Bird Johnson Golf Course are proud to support our community's tradition of excellence. Lady Bird Johnson Golf Course. Practice, play your way.
one. She doesn't. Okay.
Yeah, we'll have to visit.
Did you have that visit?
I did not, because she didn't tell me, she didn't say a word to me.
Okay.
So I figured that, no. So I just told her just now.
Well, when I send you something like that,
Did you realize that she hadn't said a word to me? So everything to me is hearsay.
yeah, gotcha. All right. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks for being here this morning. I was told we have just a little bit of housekeeping, so I'll go ahead with that before we start. I know everybody is always anxious to speak up. If you have a question or a comment, please feel free, but we need to get a microphone in your hand before you do that so we can get that recorded. This is being audio and video recorded by Fbg.Live. So if you want to tune in later or send this to your friends, do that, but we need to be able to hear everybody. So we have a really good program today. Again, we've changed up the format just a little bit, so I'm not the only one up here talking. You're not just listening to me. We have a number of people you will hear from today. We have a representative from Hill Country Methodist Hospital with us today, Clint Kodal, their Chief Executive Officer. We'll talk a little bit about the transition from Hill Country Memorial Hospital, some of the things that they're doing, a lot of what's coming up there. We'll give an update. Our Development Services Director, Anna Hudson, will give an update regarding the recently adopted Comprehensive Plan and Parks Master Plan. Andrea might weigh in on that just a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about the development at the Y that you read about in the newspaper that was recently voted down by or denied by both the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council. We'll also give a very high-level overview, update of the city's water supply. It's something we do every year with the City Council about this time. We give a state of the city water supply presentation with the Underground Water District. Chris Canazzi's here. He's put together a presentation. We're not going to show you the official presentation ahead of the council seeing it, but we will talk about some of the high points, and then we'll update you throughout the year. And then I imagine there will probably be a few questions about the eclipse. We might talk about that just a little bit. I have a couple of miscellaneous items to cover, and we're going to try to get through this with enough time to go around the room if anybody has any comments or questions. Much like I said before, and I will try to say this as nicely as possible, we understand that the transition from Hill Country Memorial to Methodist might be something that some people don't agree with. Please keep your comments respectful. I will just leave it at that. This is a very respectful group. I think I know just about everyone in the room. I'm just going to say that, throwing that out. I feel it's a privilege to have Methodist representatives here. We had Create Healthy here last time. I want to keep people like that coming to these events. Okay, with that, I'll ask Clint Kodal to come up and talk a little bit about Methodist Hospital. Clint, and could we get Clint there we go. Thank you for being here.
Appreciate it. Can you guys hear me okay? Just far enough away? I'm going to set my papers here. Appreciate the opportunity, Clinton. When you have a unique name, it's odd to call somebody else your name. I don't know if you feel the same sentiment, but there are a few of us here in Fredericksburg, but it's been a privilege to be able to chat with you, and happy to visit. Maybe I've got about probably 15, 20 minutes of updates that I'd like to share with you, and then I'm happy to take any questions. I was telling Clinton I can always provide an answer. It may not be a good one, but it'll be an answer to any question. And I can share opinions and just kind of where we're headed. But maybe by way of introduction, Clint Kodal, I've been in the I was with Hill Country Memorial for actually been with the organization just over 6 years now. And prior to that, I worked with a couple of health systems, a different health system in the San Antonio area, and then I started my career with a health system in Lubbock. And then prior to that, I actually was born and raised in Pflugerville, which was very similar to Fredericksburg until Austin kind of swallowed it up. And so I've seen what suburban growth can really do to a small community. I've also seen, I don't know why I find an interest in economic development and city planning, but when you really don't plan for growth, that's what happens is you get highways and thoroughfares through and tons and tons of tract home developments. And so I've been really, really impressed by the way in which I think our city leadership engages in development to ensure that we protect and preserve what's unique for Fredericksburg. So, we're now 5 days shy of the kind of the 1 year anniversary, if you will, maybe a birthday, depending on how you view that. And naturally, I think what you'd expect is there's a lot of reflection on my part on, what have we done over the course of the last year? And when you look at your data points a lot of times on a daily basis, it feels like, I don't know if we're making much change. I don't know that we're really progressing, but when you spread your data points out, you can start to see really what your trend line looks like. And, the two questions that I recall really hearing at that time that I think were maybe rooted in fears and anxieties are, what's going to happen with the employees? Is Methodist going to care about, all the employees that, many of them were born and raised here and locals? And then the other thing that I heard was, is Methodist going to make this hospital a bus stop or, intend to close it? Are we still going to have healthcare services? And I don't have my, my depictions, but I can share what I think some of the statistical updates are, but then also more qualitatively what some of our priorities have been that I hope will allay some of those. Because even as I started to add things up, it was really astounding for me on what sorts of investments have been able to go in over the course of the last year. But where I want to start, because I recognize that over the last year, I've been really intentional about not spending all of my time in public settings, because I really felt like in a transition like this, I needed to invest my time inside the organization. Because I thought that was really what was important for our people and our culture, and to ensure that we continue to ensure that we're providing exceptional patient care. And so the thing that potentially is probably the kind of most misunderstood feature of the organization is the ownership and the organizational structure. I think the part of Methodist Healthcare that gets lots and lots of press is HCA. And HCA is one owner. HCA is a 50% owner, and then the other 50% is Methodist Healthcare Ministries. And what I have found that makes Methodist Healthcare system different than any other HCA affiliated organization across the country is it truly is a 50-50 joint venture partnership that's governed at a local level versus governed out of a system level. And the way that I try to describe this, and I talk with all of our new employees about this, I try to talk with any community groups, is that it truly is 50-50. And if you think about sort of a parent-child relationship, or even if you've gone into business with a partner, that business is a unique entity unto itself. It's not, it's not individually one person or the other. It truly is and tries to draw on the best of both organizations. And I think what HCA really brings is it's one of the larger hospital operators in the country, operates 185 hospitals. And there's a ton of benchmarking and expertise that comes out of that. And what I have found is as I run into issues, there's anybody across the country that I can call is willing to pick up the phone and say, yeah, we tried that, didn't work, or here's what we did. And I think we've been able to benefit by probably not making some mistakes over the last year, because we can draw on expertise from people that are doing this at a national level. And then the second partner is Methodist Healthcare Ministries, which is all based in San Antonio, South Texas. And their territory aligns with the Rio, Texas Conference of the United Methodist Church. And I'm not Methodist, so I don't fully know what that means other than it's 74 counties that covers all of South Texas. Methodist Healthcare Ministries operates about $150 million a year budget. That includes direct grants. They provide direct healthcare services. They give about even predating all of this, $2.5 million a year comes out of Methodist Healthcare Ministries into the Hill Country to directly invest in resources, grants, organizations like the Good Samaritan Center, Frontera Health Clinic, are all historic and future grant recipients of Methodist Healthcare Ministries. And then the other thing that I just share about the organization is that the mission statement, I think, is what really largely drew me in as I thought about, transitioning into this role. I think it's what a lot of our employees have anchored to. And the mission is serving humanity to honor God. And that portion of it really comes directly out of Methodist Healthcare Ministries. And, it's a bit unique. And admittedly, I had worked in faith-based organizations in the past, but it adds a whole different spiritual element to the care that we provide the other day, and I think has been really a driving force for a lot of the engagement in our team over the last year. And what I can tell you as somebody who worked historically within Hill Country Memorial, but then also has worked in Methodist Healthcare, is I haven't once found a scenario where I've worked with somebody in San Antonio and, any decisions, any strategies were assessed outside of that mission. It always comes back to, are we fulfilling our mission as we make decisions and work through various discernments? And so from that standpoint, I've been really impressed with, my right now almost 12 months with Methodist Healthcare, and have felt nothing but supported by the leadership in that system. And what I'm finding is it's highly deferential to what we feel like is best for this community. So as I think about the results over the last year, make sure I get to the right page and I can quote you the right numbers. Actually, let me kind of step back, because I do think that this is important. Sorry, I know what the slide looks like. When I think about the 12-month timeline, really where we started 12 months ago was all of the base level finance and accounting systems and payroll systems. And I think when you work in healthcare, you don't realize the complexity of all of the systems and structures that exist in order to continue to do what we do every day, until you kind of lay it out in a 12-month timeline and you realize how many systems actually get changed out as a result of it. So we started with, employee conversions, payroll, benefits, and that's migrated to some back-end support systems. One of the biggest value propositions was the supply chain structure, so our ability to acquire and then acquire at a really good price supplies that are used for, everyday patient care. That really occupied the bulk of the third quarter of last year, so July to September. And then when we hit the fourth quarter and then bleeding into January was really where a lot of our computer transition took place. So that was the network. We have dedicated fiber that comes in from San Antonio, which has really considerably smoothed out our ability to keep and maintain internet service. We have far fewer downtimes. But then also integrating a system we call PACS. That's where you store things like CAT scans, MRIs, X-rays, ultrasounds. All of that becomes integrated. And one of the things we've seen as a result of that is our ability to get faster radiologist interpretations because of that integration has really helped, particularly in our ER. And that starts to enable growth, and I'll talk about it here in a little bit, but things like advanced stroke care here in our ER, because we have the benefit of speed from a radiologist standpoint. And then on top of that, because of a transition like this, generally what you attempt to do is recontract, everything on new paper so you have clean agreements going forward. And so the illustration really there is that, right, wrong, or indifferent, not here to adjudicate, the why, but we added sort of an environment where there could be a ton of disruption from the standpoint of our employees. And so the results of that, and I'll start kind of with our people and our culture, is last year we ran a turnover rate of 11.5%. And that's 11% more than I would like. But I contrast that with the national average in healthcare post-COVID runs anywhere from 22 to 30% turnover because of the availability of so many job opportunities for people that work in healthcare. And what COVID has also done is it's created a lot more transactional nature, I think, because of the way contract labor and agencies has really activated and people can monetize their skill set very differently. It's created extraordinary wage inflation in healthcare because of what the kind of the agency construct has done in supply and demand. We just don't have enough nurses, doctors, respiratory therapists, and so on and so forth to meet the need of the entire healthcare system. And, to compound that, when you think about, a nurse may make, I'll just, quote, $40 an hour normally, and an agency will pay them $75 an hour because they can charge a hospital system $150 an hour. What that nurse that made 40, now making 75 has done is they said, well, I'm going to go take 2 or 3 travel assignments a year, and I'm going to take the rest of the year off. And so you may see 10, 12% attrition in the entire workforce as a result of these kind of gig-based temporary wage increases, and it's created what was already pushing toward a shortage in particularly nursing. It's inflated that even more. And then you just layer in the fact that our region as a whole, Austin, San Antonio, Hill Country, is experiencing unprecedented in-migration and growth, which increases the need for more people, and so you have fewer of them, and you kind of get this supply-demand equation that starts to happen there. Anyway, all of that being said, our turnover rate, in spite of all of the change that occurred, missions change. Obviously, there were lots of opinions, and I respect all of the opinions around it, but we ran about half what we did in 2022 and what we did last year. And the measurement that we look at in particular is what we call net hires. Net hires would be people you hired in from the outside minus the people that left the organization. And if that's a negative number, that means you decrease the number of people in your workforce. If it's a positive number, you've increased the number of people in your workforce. Our net hires for last year, particularly for RNs, was 12. So we increased our RN workforce by 12 people last year. And admittedly, it took us a couple of months to get our feet under us from a recruitment standpoint. So when I look at the first 2 months of this year, we're trending for an increase of 30 RNs this year. And when I think about our growth equation, our ability to accept more patients is directly correlated with our ability to recruit nurses. We have bed capacity with physical space, but we need to make sure that we continue to have people to take care of those patients. And so for every nurse we add, there's more patients that we can keep in Fredericksburg. And so our people are everything. Without that, we don't continue to deliver care. I mean, it really is the core of what we do. Just a couple of things that I'll just mention. These are more soft attributes to what I think helped us with our both our recruitment over the last 12 months as well as our retention. Is we've constituted a new employee advisory group, and we've had iterations of this in the past, but it's a group of employees that are a cross-section that really help with shared decision making. And so, frankly, it's a group that I can toss hard problems to and say, tell us what you would do here. And so we're working on a 1-year celebration, for the employees. They're the ones planning all of that. It truly is organic, sort of bottom-up engagement from the employees. The other thing that I have done, I actually started this right after the transition, was I did what I call listening sessions, and every single employee across the entire hospital was invited, generally by their years of service. So we segmented them into groups of 15 to 20 people, and I had 5 questions, but it was just open-ended conversation on what they see historically that we needed to preserve about our organization. But I'll also tell you, Hill Country Memorial in its state wasn't a perfect organization by a lot of accounts. And so what did we need to change as we go forward? And there was such good feedback about that. We've actually codified that now into a monthly breakfast that celebrates both years of service, but also gives an opportunity for ongoing dialogue with our employees. There's a lot on here, but another thing that I'm really proud that we were able to do is in the initial transition negotiation, if you will, what was recognized was that we wanted to lock in what the historical 401k match, it was a 403b, but retirement match was, and with Hill Country Memorial that was at 4%. And so when everybody transitioned over, we said, tenure is, everybody comes over with their tenure, but because it was a 4% match before, and the lowest tier within Methodist is 4%, we're just going to keep everybody consistent there. And as we started to evaluate that, I made an appeal to Methodist and then subsequently HCA, who manages the benefits plan, to say, can we pull years of service into the retirement match as well? Which the result is about a $250,000 a year increase in retirement contributions. But for our longest tenured employees, they went from a 4% under Hill Country Memorial to a 9% retirement match every year, which I think has been a tremendous benefit, particularly for our long tenured folks. And then the last thing that I'll also say I'm really proud about is HCA has a employee giving campaign called the HCA Hope Fund. Actually, anybody can donate to it. But they grant about $13 million a year in employee hardship grants. So employees can apply up to $7,500 if somebody's house burns down, or I've heard wild stories. Their kid needed a surgery and they couldn't afford the out-of-pocket expense. And so in October, we had not really engaged fully. We just didn't know a lot about it. And so we had 3 employees that were giving to the HCA Hope Fund, and we did a campaign in the hospital really across all of Methodist Healthcare. And today, nearly 30% of our employees are donors into the HCA Hope Fund, which is the highest percentage of any employee base in all of Methodist Healthcare. And it just speaks to, I think, the generosity and the spirit, and frankly, the engagement of a lot of our team members that, in spite of going through all of this transition, and as a whole being the newest employees to the whole organization, contributing at that level in an employee giving campaign. So if you're ever in the hospital, what I think I'll never live down, I'm probably most notable for, is there's a 6-foot tall cardboard cutout of me advertising the HCA Hope Fund. I've been trying to figure out how to get rid of it, but it comes up in conversation every day, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to disrupt some people if I get rid of that thing. But anyway, it's been I think it's been a great experience from that standpoint. The next thing that I'll share, because I think that the growth story is really important. Last year, what we saw, I know the numbers off the top of my head, but last year what we saw was a really significant increase in admissions. So when you're a hospital, inpatient admissions is kind of how you measure your success. Last year we saw just over about a 21% increase in admissions over the prior year. That's largely due to a few factors. One, we looked at how do we engage with the Methodist One Call, that's the transfer center. And what that means is if there's a patient in Junction in their ER and they need a higher level of care, historically, I'll go 15, 20 years ago, they'd call Hill Country Memorial. But what has happened over the years is Methodist actually developed this transfer center where it doesn't matter what the patient's condition is, you call a single number and they're going to get the patient to whatever care that patient needs. And so the challenge we had was, as a community hospital, we didn't offer everything. We don't have neurosurgery here. We didn't have cardiothoracic surgery. And so slowly over time, we saw a decrease in market share. Just the market kind of disappeared because this Methodist One Call was sucking up patients, because it was easier for those health systems to be able to call and get any patient anywhere and not have to call around to say, okay, what does Hill Country Memorial provide versus any other hospitals? And so we went from 2022, we had about 30 inbound transfers from community sites. So that, think Junction, Sonora, Llano, Mason, Brady. We went from 30 transfers into Fredericksburg to 177 last year. This year, when we look at the first 2 months, we're trending for just shy of 300 transfers in. And so what we're starting to see is create more of a regional referral center, which what that allows us to do is to create scale and services, which allows us to expand services that we can offer to our local community as well. The other thing that we saw was we send about 80 patients a month out of our ER. So if you come into our ER, there are services that we historically didn't offer. One, probably the biggest one that we would send out is neurosciences, and so strokes. Anybody that came in with any kind of epilepsy or seizure symptoms, anything like that, a lot of those patients would just get sent out of our ER. So we've started to really dig into our outbound transfers. Patient hits the door and they get sent to an outlying hospital, and to determine how do we add services inside of our hospital so that we can start to really cut down on the number of patients that we send out. So the two biggest areas are neurosciences, so I talked about some, and cardiovascular services. You know, there's lots of stories. Read one in the paper a few months ago of people that have a heart attack and they get sent to Austin or San Antonio or somewhere else. And really our focus is in how we add services to decrease the number of people that left. So last year we averaged 80 a month, about 900 transfers a year. Our goal was to cut a quarter out of that, so to hit 60 transfers, recognizing there are things we don't do. We have a limited number of specialists, and so there are certain services we don't have on call on weekends. And so we can't solve for 100% of it immediately, but to really start to cut into what we send out. And so last year, I think we had about 950 transfers. Through the first two and a half months of this year, we're trending for 700 transfers. And so all of those result in increases to our admissions, which creates sustainability and so on and so forth. So we had a 21% growth in admissions last year. We're trended for another 13% growth this year. The limiting factor on that is recruiting. We just can't recruit fast enough. So if you know any nighttime ICU nurses, we would love to hire as many nighttime ICU nurses as you can find. The other thing I talked about was stroke. Historically, we'd send any and all stroke patients out. In 2022, we admitted 20 strokes. This year, we're on a path to nearly quadruple that. And that's through modifications to how we provide stroke care in the ER. We've made some revisions to the thrombolytic agent. That's, if you've ever gone in or if you had a family member, you may have heard the term TPA. We're moving to a different drug that's a little bit easier to administer and has some better outcomes associated with it, but it's giving us the ability to be able to admit more of those patients. We also added inpatient neurology consult capability. Historically, we only had consult capability in the ER, and we've added it now to the inpatient service. And then we're also in the process of adding consult capability for psychiatry, which we're seeing as a bigger and bigger reason that we need to transfer patients out. And so the focus really is on how do we continue to cut into the number of our local patients that we have to send to San Antonio. And what I always tell folks, because we didn't have this information before, but it's so eye-opening, is San Antonio is 300 beds short, inpatient beds short of what San Antonio would need. And so if I go back a year ago, and I always felt like it didn't have supporting facts, but this concern about, Methodist wants to close this so we can move all these patients to San Antonio. The reality is there's not enough beds to take care of the people in San Antonio. And so in some level, I'm like, how do I reserve beds here for our local people? Because there's almost a desire to reverse transfer because there's not enough capability to be able to take care of patients in San Antonio. And so I think you'll continue to see ongoing growth. and scale associated with the care that we can provide here locally. As I look forward, we have really three big kind of strategic areas of focus. The first one is we want to use the capacity we have. And so I've illustrated a lot of that there, in that we're adding consult services, and a lot of these are not really, to use an odd term for it, but they're not really sexy in any sense, but they're supportive in being able to just, I need to be able to talk to an infectious disease doctor to help look at me. It's not somebody we need to recruit in, but I just need somebody I can pick up the phone and talk to and say, hey, here's what the lab results are, what do you think? And so we've added some of those that allow us to keep more patients here. And so capacity is, using our existing capacity is a big one. The second is cardiovascular services. So one of our big projects right now is we're replacing our cath lab. We believe probably within 2 years we'll need to add a second cath lab. There are procedures we do, PCIs, it's a percutaneous coronary intervention, it's a stent, is probably the old way of saying that. Historically, any stents went to Austin. We're now placing stents on an elective basis 1 day a week and working currently on adding days. The second, which I think is going to be the biggest area for growth for this community, is what's called electrophysiology. So if you think about the heart, the interventional cardiologists are the plumbers, the electrophysiologists are the electricians. It's the electrical side of the heart. Think pacemakers and devices. With the amount of, with the population we have, when we think about the advancement of and diagnosis of AFib, there's huge interventional volume that right now goes to San Antonio and Austin, just because of a lack of qualified electrophysiologists here in town. And so that's a big area of growth and focus for us. And then the last one, which has had lots of attention lately, is women's services. We know that over time, we've been sort of stable at best. We've had positions posted. OB's become a really hard specialty to recruit for, but we continue to recruit there. And then I think the other piece that supports our women's services is we've never historically had in-house newborn coverage. We've covered with local pediatricians, which is really burdensome. And so we're in the process of working with a group that specializes in NICUs, is kind of the term. We're not going to become a NICU, but we'll provide neonatology supports that we can provide much better care for newborns in our nursery, and we can provide care for more newborns in our nursery. Our youngest was born in our hospital, and very quickly he had to be transferred out just because of the ability to be able to provide Q5 now. It wasn't recent, but providing more sustainability and stability for that team. And then the last area that I'll just talk about beyond services is capital investment. So there's a ton of projects that are on the list right now, honestly more than I can really keep up with. Historically, and Chris may actually know the actual number, but I think we ran between $3 and $5 million a year in capital investment. In the first 12 months, we have committed $11.4 million in capital. I have roughly $3 to $5 million in projects right now that are in some form of planning. The areas of focus is adding a second CT scanner to the hospital. That serves for both redundancy, for expansion, but also when I think about the cardiovascular patients we send out, we can add clinical capability that will give us some better diagnostic capabilities for a cardiac patient that doesn't result in a quick transfer out to a higher level of care, because we have better ability to diagnose patients in Fredericksburg. The second is we've seen an unprecedented level of growth. I didn't talk about ER growth, but we eclipsed 15,000 visits last year for the first time, and we have 8 beds. And so when we start looking at throughput per bed, we're starting to really hit some of our capacity limits on, and if you've been to the ER lately, it's busy, especially if you go between like 2 and 10. So avoid those hours if you can. But we really need to modernize our ER. I don't love how the entrance, is sort of tucked back. And then the last one is, for me, is a bit more of a vanity project, and that it's been probably decades, maybe it's been 50 years since we've really addressed the front entrance of the building. And when we came back from COVID and reopened the main entrance, what we didn't realize is we had trained everybody to go through the other outpatient entrance. So when you go into the main entrance, it feels empty. And it's because everybody's going, all the traffic's through the other direction. And so what I've asked our team to look at is there a way we can modernize the front of our building, but also provide some modifications to how patients and family members come into the facility so that it feels much more welcoming when you walk into the main entrance as a visitor. And so there's some ongoing work right now to really assess the drop-off and the entrances into the building so that it's a much more welcoming feel when you come in. So I think those are going to probably hit somewhere in the $3 to $5 million range, like I mentioned. And so at 2 years, we probably are going to be somewhere in the $16 to $17 million capital range, which is a clip of about double what our historical investment has been. So that's everything that I wanted to share. I'm happy to try to answer any questions that you may have.
So first of all, thank you.
Yeah.
Wait. Housekeeping. If we could get you a microphone right quick. Right here. Sorry. Well, it was my housekeeping item that I shared with everyone.
So first of all, thank you. You speak very well. You definitely know your information, and you've got your hands deep in what's going on. So we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
One of the challenges of the transition is that the community, most of whom were actually ignorant of what was really going on in the hospital, right, saw a foreign entity come take over a major piece of the community.
Yeah.
What are you guys doing to correct that image, not just from inside, but outside? So when someone sees someone like an officer from Methodist, they see a community contributor. Your healthcare is great, right? I got no problem. My wife and I have used the hospital a lot. We like the changes we see. But the question is I still don't see anybody out there explaining on a larger scale why Methodist is a good citizen.
Yeah.
Maybe even a better citizen in history, but at least a good citizen. I think people are still hesitant and unsure.
Yeah, it's a good question. I won't claim to have, I think, a lot of really great answers on it. It's why I mentioned the point that what I felt like I really needed to do as the CEO there over the first year was shepherd our team through the transition. I think now that we're moving into year 2, and I would call that relatively stabilized. Our results have, I think, spoken for themselves there, but to pivot more externally. It's a challenge figuring out how do you get to each stakeholder group and, communicate broadly. I'm increasing the clip at which I visit with groups like this. And so I think that's an aspect of it. I think Ken Cook and I have developed, I think over the course of the last year, a good collegial relationship, and that I want to be able to help with content and being able to continue to share story. And then I think a lot of it is just, it's organic and it's time-oriented, and we just have to be committed to being plugged in and continuing to tell the story. All of that said, I'm also open to suggestions on, the best way to communicate broadly. Because I think this is, it's relatively untracked on the best way to do it. And so, like I said, I'm open to, are there groups that we can talk with differently that can help carry some of that message? Or if there are questions or messaging that you feel like we're not hitting, hopefully what you're finding is there's a tremendous amount of transparency. I'm not concealing anything. Somebody told me once, say what you think and how you feel so you don't have to remember what to say. And so I try to communicate in that way, but I recognize I may not hit every topic that's important to each person. So that was maybe there was a non-answer somewhere in there, but I think it's multiple factorial, and at the end of the day, I think it's engagement oriented. It's not one silver bullet.
Thank you. And I would suggest you put a metric into measuring
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very informative. As a customer or consumer, I'm pleased to say that it's been seamless from my perspective, but obviously that's a really tiny part.
Yeah.
The numbers that you had in terms of the folks you transfer out were pretty consistent with what we've heard from Chief Bazell in terms of the number of folks that have to be transported someplace else. When you said that you had about 900, that's close to 3 a day.
Yeah.
If you say you're trending towards 700, that's close to 2 a day. We don't have a helicopter here. Have you got any plans for working with these various outfits around here so we don't have to wait 15 or 20 minutes for a helicopter to arrive in order to be able to get somebody there in situations where they can't be treated here and literally every minute counts?
Yeah, we are, I actually have a presentation tomorrow within our San Antonio-based strategic planning group, and one of the services that we evaluate really closely is our emergency services. And so a suggestion that I have that we're currently working through is how do we rebase a helicopter here locally that would allow for faster transport out, but faster deployments out into local areas that return back here. And so there's nothing definitive on it yet, but I know there's engagement more broadly within Methodist Emergency Services on deploying helicopters more readily at facilities that do a lot of transfers in and out. But I agree with you, it's an important factor for us to consider. Yeah.
It's recently taken me a month to get an MRI scheduled. Is that the new normal?
Well, unfortunately, I think MRI's been kind of the old normal because we have one guy that does it. That's another area that we have one machine, one person. It's great feedback. I think that's an area we have to continue to think about with regard to investment to be able to pull the wait times down. But you know, I have to acknowledge that's been sort of a consistent trend just given the number of people that are utilizing that service. And so I think the larger question is there a point in time where we actually make an investment in a second MRI scanner?
Hi, Clint. My name's Karen. I nursed at the hospital back in the 90s. My mother-in-law was house supervisor for a long time at the hospital here from 3 to 11 shift. She was in the emergency room this past summer. They wouldn't even give her ice chips. They wouldn't give her an Ensure. She was suffering from pain. She was not a candidate for surgery. And I am, in fact, my doctor has left the community. I went to go see a GYN just 2 weeks ago, walked in for my appointment, and the staff said, "Did anybody tell you?" "Tell me what?" "Your doctor's leaving as of tomorrow." Why start? You mentioned the RNs that you're getting in. What about the doctors that are leaving?
Yeah. So we've had there's been a couple of retirements, obviously, and, you know, I won't get into, you know, tons of contract issues. What I can tell you from the organizational sense is the best foot forward has been on every physician. Nobody has been penalized as a result of it. I recognize that, you know, some physicians may have made, you know, decisions about their future, you know, just based on their, you know, perceptions of where they wanted to work. That's not necessarily a new thing as a result of the transition. We've seen physicians come and go over the years, and I think it's unfortunate in communities this size, especially when you have an N of one. You know, we have one gastroenterologist, we have one urologist, and so they're so susceptible to major disruption if you have somebody that, you know, makes a personal decision to, you know, change employment, change their style of practice, what have you. And so I hear it. I know all of them personally. Frankly, most of them I personally recruited at one point or another in the past. And you know, all I can say is that we've really made every effort to try to sustain some of those, and we haven't been successful in some areas. And I think it's. on our doctors. We have, so Dr. Andrasian retired, and that had been a planned retirement over several years. There was collaboration with Dr. Love and Dr. Fink on what's the timing that we recruit for that long term. Dr. Thompson decided to step away, and then Dr. Flood Schaefer, our OB-GYN, is the most recent that we have worked with. So on the fly, I think we have 287 physicians on staff. A lot of those are, hospital-based, but as a percentage, it's not. We have more doctors than we have nurses, frankly. But, frankly, there's a few that are, they're higher touch, frankly, and some that have been in the community for a long time. So I recognize that. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Deb Youngblood. I have a question that's based on something I heard through the rumor mill, and I apologize for that. But when I heard it, I didn't know how to respond to it because I don't know if it's fact or fiction. So what I heard was that the administrative personnel, the people that check you in, the people that do the paperwork and blah, 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 they're all being replaced by Methodist healthcare people over the next few months. Is that true?
Not that I know of. No, we've had the same people that have been there. I mean, frankly, they Methodist doesn't have the people to come in and just replace all the people we have here locally, and so that would add a ton of effort to try to recruit people to replace really good people we have. I hadn't heard that one, and so I appreciate you sharing with me, but I hear a few, but as far as I know, there's no plans to do that. Yeah, thanks for asking that. Is there anything else?
Thank you, Clint. All right, so again, by request, and we'll be asking that at the end, if there is someone else you would like for us to get in front of you. We've heard Underground Water District, the new manager. He will be presenting, I believe, on April 2nd. He'll be there. So we hope to have him here at some point in the future, but we're open to suggestions if you want to see somebody up here. Thank you again, Clint. Okay, we'd like to talk just a little bit about our, again, recently adopted comprehensive plan and parks master plan. I'm going to hand it over to our Development Services Director, Anna Hudson.
Good morning, everyone. Anna Hudson. So there should be at least one, if not two copies. This is just a summary document, maybe 5 pages, very high level of the comp plan that was adopted by City Council on March 18th. So those of you that have been coming for the last year and a half have heard me talking about the comp plan, and so now we have it, and now we get to do the fun part of implementing it. There are about 96 items, specific items to implement, and those are based in 7 categories. So you can see those categories of guiding principles that we'll be working on. And so going forward, staff will be referencing the comp plan, and as council makes decisions on the next year budget, they'll be referencing the comp plan. What are the big things that the citizens want as far as infrastructure, and then also ordinances and things that we want to change. So there's a variety of things. We heard through the public hearing process, this gentleman pointed out, he said, I saw one map, and then by the time it got to council for adoption, it was different. And that was the point. So some of the early drafts, had different maps. And at the meetings, those maps changed over time because we were listening to the public input. I will say on the front of this, there's a QR code that takes you to the comp plan website. We don't have the final document yet. We're still waiting on the consultants to make those final revisions that council required. So the final document's not out. I've not got copies available for production yet, but we're expecting those any day now from the consultants. And that will be the guiding document that I'll be referencing for planning and zoning and for city council. And I think the other big part of that for you, the citizens, is to find out where you can integrate with the comp plan. So there are things like a new nature center. There's lots of organizations, the chamber, the EDC, that are recognized in the comp plan as partners for implementing this. Again, because Development Services has a staff of 6. This isn't something that we're going to be doing exclusively. It's definitely a community document. So I would encourage you to take a look at the priorities and what organization you're already affiliated with and how you can work with us to implement that. And I'm happy to come to any organization and make a presentation, where it's the Board of Realtors. I'll be making a presentation to the Chamber in May. So if you're a part of a group and want to hear maybe how your group can interface with the city to help adopt or implement now the adopted comp plan, please feel free to reach out. The other issue I will address is last week's headline in the paper, because I know you guys all read the paper. So it says, Council denies the Muse project at the Y, which is a headline. But Planning and Zoning saw this application for an amendment, if we're talking about the Y, right? Everybody knows the Y at 290 and 87, the physical Y that's created there. Back in 2018, P&Z and Council adopted what we call a PUD, a Planned Unit Development. So it's a zoning district. It's just a little different than our typical commercial zoning or residential zoning. It's a flexible zoning, and this particular one was designed for what we call mixed use, right? So allowed by right on that would be a hotel conference center, retail, restaurant, condominium use, lots of different things that were very specific to that site. So a PUD is 2 things. It's zoning, right? So zoning tells us the what can be in this place, and how tall can it be, what are the setbacks, and so those are the things that are included in zoning. Now and a PUD also has a site plan tied to it. It's not a final site plan, but it's a general, and these are where those buildings will go. So that's a PUD. It's a zoning, but with a site plan, which is unlike typical zoning, right? Typical zoning just tells you what and how big. So fast forward to the city council meeting. The developer, so the original 2018 developer that got the PUD went away. They sold it, so the property's now under new ownership. They've owned it for 1.5 years, maybe 2 years, and they've been working with staff and P&Z and council on an amendment, a change to that already existing PUD. So a PUD is zoning, and zoning doesn't expire. It's in place. It'll stay in place until it's actually amended or changed. So the PUD amendment came to P&Z and council. Ultimately, P&Z and council denied the change to the PUD, but the PUD exists. So a hotel conference center is allowed there, okay? So I just want to clarify that they do have the right to build a hotel conference center with retail, with restaurant. And my understanding from talking to the developers, they are going to go forward with something that looks like the original 2018 plan. So not what they asked for most recently, but they're going back to the drawing board to look at the original 2018 plan. So that's, just want to clarify all of that. Any questions about the comp plan or the development?
Hold tight.
Oh, yeah.
I actually think I have a loud enough voice that most people can hear me. What were the changes that the new developer was looking for?
The biggest change, so the PUD itself says, you have these uses that are allowed, and the site plan shows those locations, an approximate footprint. So the new developers wanted to do condominium use and wanted to identify a condominium building location on that site plan. And they wanted to essentially take some of the retail space. The original had about 40,000 square feet of retail restaurant. And so they were essentially changing some of the allocated retail and changing that to a condominium building. And some of the changes to the hotel conference. They weren't calling it a conference center. The new guys weren't calling it a conference center. They were looking for more hotel rooms and less meeting space. But ultimately, they were kind of swapping out some of the buildings that had been approved for retail restaurant and changing that square footage to condominium square footage. Anyone else? Okay.
All right. Thank you, Anna. Chris, could I get you to come up? Chris Canese, our Director of Public Works and Utilities, will talk a little bit about water supply presentation again. If you want to see the entire presentation, you can watch it, attend the council meeting, or tune in after. It'll also be available on the website. So, Chris.
Morning. So as Clinton mentioned at our regular city council meeting next Tuesday, April 2nd, we'll provide that presentation to city council, to our citizens. This is an annual presentation. It's a joint presentation between city staff and Underground Water Conservation District. I've sent my draft presentation to Paul. I assume he will put his slides in whether this week or on Monday. But we'll have that presentation available for those. Just a quick snapshot as to what that presentation all entails. City staff's portion, we'll look at the rainfall data, which I've presented a few times here at this meeting. We've presented that to City Council as part of the City Manager's report. We'll look at historic trends in rainfall, really over the last 10 years. We get into a little bit more detail. The reason we get into that detail is really because we're all groundwater, so obviously rainfall is how we recharge that aquifer and has a direct impact to that recharge. We look at our aquifer monitoring, so we have 2 monitoring wells located in various parts of the aquifer. We'll show the trends there. We'll show 30-day trends. We'll look at a 12-month trend, and then we'll look at what that aquifer level has done historically over the life of that monitoring. We get into a little bit more detail on our water conservation program, get into some of the detail as to what we do to conserve water, and show what our water loss audit percentages are historically. We get into some of the details, again, as to what we're doing there with the water conservation goals and those results. Our water rates and our watering stage, our water restriction stage, we get into the details there, how we change from one stage to the other. And again, it's all tied to a local drought index that Paul will likely present on, or he has in the past. So a lot of really good information. I'm happy to answer any questions this morning, but really, again, the details will be presented at that next council meeting. I guess one last thing, we do have quite a few projects on the water side. Over the last 10 or so years, we've done a remarkable job on infrastructure improvements. Council's supported those. We'll present that information as well as to what some of those big projects are that you see around town. So, any questions this morning? Yes, sir.
You mentioned conservation. Are y'all doing anything for capture, or is that included in conservation?
As far as rainwater capture, so that's one thing that the comp plan looked at. We are looking at a couple of kind of pilot projects on city facilities, one of those being located at City Hall and then one at our warehouse. The first one will probably be put in at City Hall. It's about a 12,000 gallon system, so not huge, but definitely noticeable. So we actually, just this morning, I submitted a mid-year budget amendment to our finance director for consideration of that project. So the use of that will likely be for filling of the fire trucks, but also some irrigation around the City Hall facility. Probably not directly tied in to our irrigation system, but the ability to fill potable plants and stuff like that around City Hall.
I was thinking a little bit bigger than that. My grandfather near Bernie had berms on his property that directed water as it was flowing from hard rains into parts of the county where the water would drain into the aquifers. Is that the kind of thing that y'all are looking at also?
No, sir. You know, we really, I guess, we could obviously get that information out to the public. The city of Fredericksburg itself, you know, doesn't own any property that we could do that large scale. Also, our aquifer is slightly different. I'm not sure what aquifer, you know, your grandfather's place, Edwards Aquifer, comes to mind, you know, where there's a large volume of water that enters certain locations, very specific locations. Our aquifer isn't quite set up that way. The Pedernales River is probably the biggest contributor to the aquifer. And it's my understanding, again, Paul Tiber has a lot more information on that, but there are certain areas that are, the spring basically reverses. When the aquifer is obviously discharging into the river, the spring is flowing, but when the spring stops flowing, it's actually going into the aquifer. So it's kind of a reverse flow. So the river is a body of water that does that to some extent, but there's not these big cavernous areas that, you know, the water flows directly into that we could direct that runoff.
Based on your comment, there's a recent concern with the TCEQ permit for Ray Archer's facility to push 35,000 gallons of wastewater a day into the Pedernales. Is the city aware of that, and are you doing anything to see how that might affect aquifer quality?
Sure. So I have seen that advertisement in the paper, that notice. So yeah, Archray has sent a permit into TCEQ for discharge of treated wastewater. The city of Fredericksburg has a very similar permit with the state for our wastewater treatment plant. As far as the amount of water going into the river, the treated wastewater, 35,000 gallons a day, I think that's a max number. And I haven't seen the exact permit, and those limitations, you know, is fairly small, I would say, in regards to the city of Fredericksburg system. As far as them pulling water out, you know, that's the aquifer side. That's the freshwater side, I would say. I don't know what the Underground Water Conservation District has permitted for water use at that site. As far as the discharge permit, again, that goes through the state and is permitted accordingly.
I was wondering if you guys stay active in that thing, because if you're managing water in the region where the wells are.
Well, you know, the city of Fredericksburg isn't really managing the Underground Water Conservation District really is the manager of Gillespie County. The city of Fredericksburg manages what we're pulling out and what we're providing to our customers, but we're not an overall manager of the aquifer like the Underground Water Conservation District.
I agree with the clarification. Thank you.
Deb Youngblood again. I'm with the Pedernales River Alliance, and I can mostly answer that. We are in discussion with Archray for, we would prefer to not see them put any more effluent into the river. I mean, the city does enough of that. And the solution to cleaning things up is not to add more effluent to the river. So we would really like to see Archray not put anything in the river. And we would prefer that they go with a land application. And that's what we're talking with them about. Nothing is resolved yet. And so that's where we're at.
Yeah, so a big component of our reuse system, as Ms. Youngblood has just mentioned, is our reuse application. So during the summer months, just depending on rainfall, we discharge little to no water into the creek, which ultimately gets into the Pedernales. Our golf courses, or excuse me, this golf course and Boot Ranch golf course take about 500,000 gallons of reclaimed water every day. So a total of about 1 million gallons every day, again, depending on rainfall. Sometimes it starts this time of year, sometimes it starts a little later, all depending on rainfall. Another big use of our reclaimed water is for construction purposes. Contractors that you see building subdivisions, whether that's a foundation for a house or a business, whether that's roads, dust control, all of that is our reclaimed water. We don't allow them to tie into a fire hydrant, as some communities do, and use potable water for construction purposes. So I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's a very large amount of water that is used for construction purposes rather than being discharged into the creek or using potable water for those purposes. Yes, sir.
Is the city actively, okay, I won't use the teacher voice. Is the city actively seeking another water well site?
We are, yes, sir. We are currently working with the landowner. We've hired a consultant. We will be doing flow monitoring on this property through the duration of the summer.
Are you close?
It makes sense for our system. It does make sense for our water system. I think we can be good partners with this property owner, certainly. Yes, sir.
With all the tourists who will be visiting for the eclipse, are you concerned at all about water pressure in terms of emergency services? And also, is there any kind of public campaign to remind people who are coming from all over the world that we're in a drought condition and they need to conserve along with us?
Yeah, I think our water system will be in good shape for the duration of the eclipse, for our visitors, for our locals. Don't have any major concerns about the water system itself, whether pressure or the amount or anything like that. As far as campaigns, I'm not aware of anything necessarily that's being broadcast out to individuals at this time.
Can you talk a little bit about water diversification and what we're doing to address our one water source?
Yeah, so one thing we'll be looking at, in fact, Texas Water is, I believe, not next week, maybe the following week. It's at the beginning of April. We'll be looking to probably get a consultant on board to look at our overall picture. So we're unique in the location we are. We don't have a surface water body per se, other than the Pedernales River, which is pretty well allocated. I don't think there's really any surface water rights available on that facility. But we'll be looking to bring a consultant on board to look at all of our options, whether that's more reclaimed water uses, maybe surface water, basically laying everything out on the table. And that'll be looking 50 years down the road, 75 years down the road. Long term, not the next 10 years, but more longer term than that. But we are very unique. I mean, our reliance on groundwater in the aquifer is our primary source. But there might be other sources that might help kind of bridge the gap, again, long term for us. So.
Given that the Pedernales River is the primary recharge areas, is it feasible to put dams or weirs in those areas to retain water over the recharge areas rather than letting it just go on down?
I mean, that'll be something that'll be looked at for sure. Obviously, permitting for something like that is very challenging. Takes a lot of time, but certainly that'll be something that we'll have a consultant look at kind of high level. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I hope you invite me to the meeting because I'm going to say no to those dams. What happens to a dam when you put it on a river, especially a low-flow river like this one, is you trap that water behind the dam, and when it flows in, it comes in and it sinks to the bottom right in front of that dam and becomes, especially in the heat of the summer, becomes a toxic stew. And then the next thing you know, we get a fall rain, which comes in and just floods everything, and all that toxic stew goes right down the river, and it does sink in. It does kill plants. It's terrible. It kills fish. So we really just don't want any dams or weirs or anything like that. We want that river to flow free. So invite me to your meeting, and I'll say that again.
All right, thank you. Happy Easter to everybody.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So just a couple of miscellaneous updates at this point. I wanted to turn back to our guiding principles in the comprehensive plan. Has anybody been involved in a comprehensive plan or a master plan of any type? Any hands? Hospital staff, I'm sure you have master plans, others, council members, certainly. You know, we're always accused of doing these master plans and just putting them on a shelf and they collect dust. I will say in Public Works, we've completed a number of master plans. In fact, Chris and I over the last decade talked about how we need to get these good plans in place and get some of these projects done. I feel like we've done a good job. In the last 5 years, we've invested over $20 million in our water infrastructure. All those projects come out of a water master plan. We have a transportation master plan that contemplates a number of transportation projects that I think would be advantageous. We've had master drainage plan and so forth. Recently, a comprehensive plan, parks master plan. So we have all these master plans on the shelf, but we don't have any way to really keep up with all of those together. So now that we've completed the comprehensive plan, and this is community driven, these are really the community priorities. We're talking about a strategic plan with the council, development of a strategic plan that is a tool that includes all of these different master planning efforts and all of the projects included in every one of these plans. It is a tool that we use during the budget process. It is a tool that we use to give updates to the council on progress. The council can sponsor these initiatives and projects. There's accountability. We report progress back to the council every single month with my regular update. We use it as an employee evaluation tool, really setting those goals and refreshing that every year. Every single item that's on a council agenda will point back to one of these priorities. So that's something that we're working on right now. I look forward to seeing a lot more regarding the strategic plan. We have at least one more work session with the council. We had what I'm calling a strategic planning session with the council, I guess a little bit over a week ago. About 5-hour long session, and we talked a lot about this, a lot about the budget or capital improvement plan. And we also talked about revenue cost savings ideas and new sources of revenue in our general fund. Our general fund primarily supports emergency services, including fire EMS, and our police department, parks department, street department, health department. But the majority of it goes to emergency services. So we're very interested in really scrubbing the budget to try to find as much savings in our internal operations as we can to keep our tax rate low. And we're also interested in some other things, new sources of revenue. And Annette was there. She heard the entire conversation. She heard me talk about this last night at Citizens University. We're talking about some other strategies to get a little bit more from our wonderful visitors instead of putting that on the backs of our resident ratepayers, taxpayers. One of the items that we're looking at, potentially, and we'll be talking a lot more about this, is a parking management strategy for Main Street and some of the surrounding areas. And we've had a lot of good input from folks that know how these systems work in other places. We're not talking about just blanketing every road with a parking meter or something like that. It's a lot more strategic. It changes with the day of the week. It changes with the month of the year, depending on whether it's holiday season, there's a festival going on, whatever the case may be. But it's a very dynamic thing. We're talking about trying to get out and educate the public. In fact, I'm speaking to a chamber group at lunch today about Main Street. This is one of the the highest level topics that we will be discussing with the group. There's some people that are very much for this type of thing. There are others that are adamantly opposed. And again, it's our job to educate folks and get that feedback before we contemplate doing something like this. But that is one of the big ones. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. And this gentleman right up front here is familiar with a system like this that works in Louisiana. We want to give every resident in Fredericksburg a free parking pass. So you would have a permit, we would have your license plate number or numbers on that permit so that you would be able to park on Main Street, again, free of charge. We don't want to impact our residents, but we would like to get just a little bit more from our visitors, manage that parking so that we can spread it out a little bit and so forth. So again, the strategic plan, you'll be hearing a lot more about that. You'll be hearing a lot more about some of the cost savings ideas that we have, and again, new sources of revenue coming up. I was asked to give an update on the soccer fields. I mentioned last time, if you can look right across here, there's a huge pile of dirt sitting on the city-owned property next to the airport that was originally designated for our sports complex facility, sports park facility. We had a couple of generous donations, one from the Scripps family, also from Create Healthy, thank you very much, that made the construction possible. We're building a number of soccer fields to meet the needs of our local soccer affiliations. That is under construction. The piles of dirt are there. They're actually manipulating that soil to remove a lot of the rocks, and also implements being added back to that soil before they place it and start building the fields. But the idea is to start planting the fields in the next couple of months and play beginning on those fields toward the end of this year. So as far as I know, they're on time with the construction. Andrea, do you have anything to add there? They have a lot of heavy equipment out there. The folks that are doing this are some of the same folks that built the facility down in Kerrville. They know what they're doing. We look forward to that construction being complete and again having the first true soccer facility here in Fredericksburg. Lastly, before I go around, could I have Shelley Goodwin come up? I did this to her last night, too. As a lot of you know, Shelley Goodwin is our city secretary. Today is her last day with the city of Fredericksburg. She will be leaving us. She has accepted the city secretary position for the city of Rockport, which she will start down there April 1st. So Shelley has done a lot of good work for the city of Fredericksburg. She certainly impacted the organization, this entire community. She will be missed. I've learned a ton from her. So thank you very much for all of your good work and service. You bet. You can stand close to me.
Okay.
There you go.
I just want to say how Fredericksburg just means so much to me, and a lot of you do as well, and how welcoming you were. And I really thank you for that. And to the Methodist, I recently got to visit the hospital. I didn't really want to, but I got to do it twice. And the service was just above and beyond. And the care I received, and the employees really seemed to be happy, and that kind of reflects on that they like their job. And so, and it showed. And I just want to thank everybody again for allowing me to serve.
Thank you very much, Shelley. She said she got a thank you card from the hospital the day after her surgery, so I'm not, thank you for being a patient. Yeah. Okay, at this point, we do have just a little bit of time. I have missed this portion of the meeting the last couple of times. I'd like to go around the room if anyone has any specific questions. I'm sorry? Are you going to cover the eclipse I think everybody knows about the eclipse coming up April 8th. Yes? 2024. We've been talking about it since 2018. Any specific questions about the eclipse? Andrea, can you answer that?
Yes, there are going to be porta potties stationed all over the city in the city parks. We have dozens out here at Lady Bird. We have them at Fort Martin Scott. There's a map online, or if it's not linked right now, it'll be on our Eclipse website soon, showing the location of the maps and then also other things that we'll have stationed around the city. So we've basically reserved every portable bathroom we can in around 150 miles of here.
So specifically, I read an article about what Kerrville's doing, and I had not heard any of the same kind of thing here. So Kerrville basically is shutting the city down starting at 8 a.m. on Monday. Roads closed, single directions to basically keep people away from parts of the city. And the local residents there are quite worried about how it impedes them getting to their work jobs and everything else because of a city-imposed gridlock. Not the tourists doing it, but the city doing it purposefully. I have not heard of anything like that in Fredericksburg, but is there any place where the city plans that you have to set up roadblocks or are going to impact traffic other than just the tourists being here and being in a way?
Right, we just talked about that with our county judge yesterday, and it's my understanding that TxDOT is not proposing any road closures around Fredericksburg, so you won't see that here. I will say that city staff will be at work that day, although they may not be doing their primary job. Again, it's our responsibility to make sure that our facilities are open and safe and we're providing services again to our visitors. I believe the county is closed, although a lot of them will be doing the same thing. We won't be doing business as usual at City Hall, the landfill and so forth. It will be modified somewhat, but again, we're requiring everybody to report to work, and we have people that are going to be in designated areas. So again, we've been talking about this event for the last, the fire chief said it last night, I think 4 years we started talking about this. We feel like we do have a good plan. We understand that a lot of it is going to be proactive, but a lot of it will be reactive. I'm not sure people are going to use porta potties or the trash cans that we put out and so forth, so there's going to be a lot of cleanup, I understand. But I will say also that the city of Fredericksburg is not promoting this event with any special events that we're putting on. The city of Kerrville is doing that. So maybe some of the road closures that they're doing are to support those types of events. I don't know if they have a traffic control plan to get people back on the roadway in and out of those events, so it might be related to some of that. Yes, sir.
One thing that I've noticed about the city of Kerrville, early they had been touting that they expected 400,000 people to come into the area, and now that figure has dropped to 100,000, I believe the last thing. So is that correct, or do we expect as many people as, I thought the 400,000 was a little out of the ordinary.
Right, that jumped, I think, from 150,000 to 400,000. I'm not sure the reason.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the reason, but I'm not sure of the reason, but all of our planning has centered around 100,000 extra people in our community here. All the planning that we've done to this point. Not to say that we can't handle anything above that, but that's kind of what we've estimated throughout our planning process.
Chief, do you want to talk about how you all are spreading out across the county and preparing to address any issues from every corner of Gillespie County?
Yes, sir. So previous to this meeting, I was in a staff meeting there at our fire station, and this was our primary topic of discussions this morning. So what we're doing is we are beefing up our staff throughout here in Fredericksburg, where we currently have 5 ambulances that we operate out of. Total, 2 of those are reserve ambulances that we push in service when one of our other full-time ambulances is out of service. And so our plan is to staff those 2 additional units, put one in Willow City, at the Willow City Fire Station, and put another one of those in Stonewall. So we are spreading our resources throughout the county, along with all of the volunteer departments in the county who have their personnel will all be staffing their stations on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So those are our plans. Our goal from the beginning has been to spread our resources throughout the county, so if we do have issues getting from one location to another, we have those resources in certain areas spread out around the county. That doesn't mean we're still not going to have congestion. That's my biggest concern through this whole process, is going to be the congestion of the individuals and the people who are coming in to view the eclipse. And so we are very cognizant of that, and we want to make sure that when we get those calls that we can get there. And that's the reason for spreading our resources throughout the county.
And I'll tell you, the last year we've been having monthly meetings with the city and the county, TxDOT representatives. We have the sheriff's department there. We've had Methodist representatives with us, representatives from HEB, Walmart, all of the major players in the game. Texas Division of Emergency Management, Forest Service. Everybody is on the same page. Everybody has their assignments in regards to responding to this event. So again, we feel like we have a very good plan. Most of the folks that I talk to locally say they're going to stick pretty close to home. So that is pretty good to hear. We're not going to be all that worried about RVs that might show up for a couple of nights in neighborhoods, or if someone pitches a tent in the yard. We've had a lot of questions about that. Renting your home out over the weekend or for that night, you know, it's going to be fairly short-lived. We're not doing any permitting for that, although our law enforcement also has a very good plan. We're not going to be addressing some of those types of issues actively. All right, any other questions?
I would say that I'll tell all of our people or the people that I work with is expect the unexpected, you know. That's what we do every day, pretty much. So
that's right.
We don't ever know what we're coming across, but we're going to take care of it as it comes. So.
You bet.
So from the hospital's perspective, and I can't give the city staff, Clinton, Chief Bizzle, Justin Calhoun, enough credit for the preparation that they've done around this. Our priority as a hospital is protecting and preserving emergency services. And so on that Monday of, we won't have elective surgeries. Nobody wants to go get their colonoscopy on the eclipse day. So all of that will be canceled. We'll have staff in-house. And also to the question earlier, we know at least for that day, we'll have a helicopter on site so that we can handle any transports out of town without utilizing city services, so they can stay here locally. And so I think our team is really well prepared. Our chief operating officer did a talk with chamber leadership, and in describing our preparation as we prepare like we could have a mass casualty event, not because we're expecting one, but because we need to be prepared for that sort of influx if something like that were to happen. And so that's the mindset: supplies, food, fuel. And then the odd one that's come up that I don't know that anybody's thought about, but this is I think the last eclipse, one of the communities in the Midwest had an influx of snake bites because people are cutting fences, and so we'll have extra doses of antivenom and things like that. So I think our team's done an incredible job. We can't plan for everything that comes up, but we're planning like we would have the unexpected. So appreciate your team's collaboration on this.
You bet. Thank you. Thank you for that. So expect the unexpected, and again, there are a lot of details that have been discussed. You know, I think we've probably turned over every stone a couple of times at this point. Any other questions from the group? Yes, ma'am.
So a while back, you had mentioned that the state was going to redo Main Street downtown. So when are they going to start that, and are we going to do the parking stuff at the same, parking changes at the same time that they're doing that?
Got to get you to answer that, Garrett.
April 6th?
No, thankfully not. So we've been talking to TxDOT. Again, that work was supposed to start around Christmas. As you know, it didn't happen. So at the last update meeting we had with them, they have selected a contractor. They're going to do the work all at once. So it won't be a phased project any longer. They're going to come in, do the repairs, and then the mill and overlay at the same time. The work will all occur at night to try to minimize impacts, particularly to the residents. They will be restriping everything based on the plan the city developed, so we'll have standard spaces throughout. We'll also be getting rid of that odd center median area all along Main Street. So I would guess, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're thinking May or June timeframe, but we just don't know. But as soon as we hear something, how long? We're not really sure. Again, it's a state contract. They're going to try to minimize the impact is what they've assured us. So I would think 3 to 4 weeks, but that's just a guess.
How far southeast?
So it goes from the Y out to Crystal Drive, so about just past Whataburger. Basically where Main Street widens back out with the center turn lane. It's that entire stretch.
Another question. And for Andrea, that new park foundation that I've read about, how is that going to affect you?
So the Parks Foundation was approved by City Council to have a working relationship with the city about a month ago. They haven't determined yet what their first project or first thing they're going to be working on. Right now they're getting representatives from all the local organizations like the Nature Center, like the swimming teams, the soccer associations, tennis, pickleball, to try to determine what they want to do. And they'll look at the master plan too to see what in the parks master plan was a top priority and try to determine what they're going to use as their first project. But they're going to be a help for sure. They'll be able to do things that the city may not be able to fund. They'll be able to help us do those. So we're looking forward to working with them.
Thank you. Now, I don't have a question, but I do have a thank you. This past weekend, our church hosted Palms in the Plots, a church service for our congregation and members of the community. And I just want to thank Jennifer Krupa and the park staff for helping us to do that. They did a wonderful job, and as they've done in the years past. So just thank you for your support and your assistance.
Thank you for that. We'll definitely pass that along.
I have a question about the sports fields, and I'm so appreciative of the people, the foundations that donated a lot of money that made it possible. But on the other hand, we are still in stage 4 water restrictions, and I think I've read on the internet it takes about 25 or so thousand gallons per acre to deliver an inch of water. And has there been any consideration of using an artificial turf for these fields so that we don't have to use our scarce water resources for the sports field?
Yes, ma'am, they did take a look at artificial turf. That was not an option in the end. We had also originally proposed to use reclaimed water to irrigate. We no longer produce a type 1 effluent that can be used in that way. So it will be potable water. We understand that. We're working with them on that watering schedule, ensuring that we can deliver that water and it doesn't impact our entire system. So again, when you look at the overall water use per day, in the summertime we're pumping about 4 million gallons out into the system, and 70% of that is used for outdoor irrigation at single-family residential homes. So just to put into perspective what they're using compared to what our residents are using every single day. I'm not saying it's not a lot of water, but when you compare the overall use, it's very low impact.
It's just the cumulativeness of this project and that project and this pool, and then all of our city grounds around the courthouse are all St. Augustine grass, which is really not the best. I mean, that's what I have, because that's what we bought with the house. But
Right.
I'm actively trying to change that. But
Right.
are we making any other changes for city-owned property to get rid of our water-thirsty plantings and putting in something that's more drought-resistant and for our, for our long-term community water supply?
Right, and Chris mentioned this morning, we're going to actively pursue those rainwater collection and reuse projects. Again, cumulatively, they make a much larger impact. We've talked about incentives for those types of things. Stage 4 watering and our water rate structure itself penalizes people for high use, and we see the results of that when you look at the top 100 water users. Although they use a lot of water, they're not using as much as they did use in the past. We're hoping for a more positive report for the future in terms of weather coming up over the next couple of years. But of course, we're not banking on that. We're conservative minded all the time. We're not running out of water, but we certainly need to be very careful with that resource that we have. There are a lot of people tapping into it. We are seeing, a bit of growth, but again, the growth is multifamily apartments where you don't see that very intensive use like you do single-family residential homes. We add about 60 single-family residential homes a year. All of the apartments combined, they probably use about 5% of our entire water each day.
But there's or I should say, are there any building regulations for new homes that are being built? There's 9 just down the street from us on the old radio property, for them to do catchment systems or the kind of plantings they can do?
Not at this time. There is not a landscape requirement for new construction. There have been a lot of questions and comments made about low flow fixtures and things like that. That's the norm these days for new construction. We've done a lot of things, again, on the city side. I've mentioned this before. Your average rural city in Texas, their water loss, in other words, when they pump a gallon of water out into the system, their water loss is 50%. They lose half of that. Ours hovers between 1.5% and about 6%. It's one of the lowest in the state. So instead of developing more wells and spending more money and doing all of that, we really take care of the integrity of our system. That's water conservation in itself. This golf course, using 100% of that reclaimed water on this golf course and Boot Ranch during the summer, that's water savings that would add significantly. It's 25% of what we pump out every single day. Those things like that also make a very big difference. And maintaining those and finding ways to do more of that throughout the year. You heard us talk about this water portfolio diversification exercise that we're going through. We talked a lot about that with council last year. They did fund that effort. We will be pursuing that this year. We are actively pursuing another well out in the county that does not influence our other wells, that water supply wells that we have. It doesn't influence any other water supplies for farming and so forth. So we're very carefully looking at that. So we're always focused on water supply, water diversification, just being very conservative and conscientious with the use of that precious resource here in the city and the county. Yes, sir.
I'd like to take this opportunity to publicly thank the city staff for all the work that they did to make the celebration out at Fort Martin Scott possible, starting with the mayor and the city council, city manager, across the departments. Shelley, the police, fire, EMS, the street department, the IT department, the electric department, the health department, especially Andrea in the Parks and Recreation Department. She sat through monthly in-progress review meetings starting back in August up to the present time. This simply wouldn't have been possible without the help from everybody across the city to make it happen. It was a city event on city property, and I just want to commend everybody. The professionalism and friendliness of everybody involved just was a pleasure to work with. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, and thank you for all your hard work. The event certainly wouldn't have been possible, wouldn't have happened without Dr. Hammerson and his wife wanting to do that, pouring through thousands of pages of documentation, learning the history, and really very detailed process. These monthly meetings that we had, we started with at least 15 or 20 pages worth of tasks. So great job on that, very detailed. I don't know if he's for hire, but if you have a special event you need planned and managed, he might be your guy. So thank you to both of you. Garrett.
One other quick announcement on the eclipse. Clinton mentioned the landfill being closed, but if your garbage can is collected on a Monday, we're not going to try and get the garbage trucks around town on that day. So your can will be collected on Tuesday. So again, if you're Monday, we'll pick it up on Tuesday.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? All right. Thank you for being here, and we will hopefully see you next month.